We appreciate them for providing food today, so be sure to grab some before we finish. I think that's when we finish, right?
That's when we finish. Yep.
Okay, good. Okay, well, let's jump right on in. And we do want to start out with some of the challenges that we've been facing on a technology side of things with SkySlope, okay? So we're still using SkySlope. We still pay for it as a brokerage. Probably about 3 weeks ago, I logged in and got this really disheartening message that said, DigiSign will no longer be a product of SkySlope Forms. And I'm like, what is this? And of course I called Chris, and Chris is like, Dave, this is all I've been dealing with. So let's address that right now, okay? You're not losing DigiSign, you're not losing SkySlope, you're not losing SkySlope Forms. All of that is staying, okay? Unfortunately, SkySlope is unwilling to get rid of that little paywall nagging message, okay? And that's because as a company nationwide, they are separating their products. So in the past, you had to pay for both products together. That's no longer the case. You can pay for them separately. But a company like ours that has a brokerage solution where all of our agents get it, they're unwilling to just move that little paywall. So the way that we have to get it removed, and Chris, you correct me if I'm wrong, is your email with us and the MLS and UAR of all organizations has to match. So if you're running into any issue where you log in and the email does not match, reach out to Chris. And poor Chris has just been dealing with this nonstop where he's going in, reaching out to UAR, updating the emails, reaching out to SkySlope. I did my best to reach out to SkySlope upper management, just say, hey, we've got some agents who are really upset, worried that they're going to lose this, that it's a product that we're no longer paying for. That is not the case. Please know that we pay for it. It's still a service that you get free of charge, okay? Chris, is there anything you would add to that?
No, you very much covered it.
Okay, good.
Can I just give a shout out to Chris though?
Yes, let's all give a shout out to Chris.
The after hours, I was writing an offer, after hours, he was on a three-way call with SkySlope, getting it resolved, and thank you very much, Chris.
Yes. Well done. Yep. And it is annoying because unless you're clicking on the right locations, it looks like you've been locked out. So we've had several agents who are like, I can't get in. What's the problem here? Chris has helped out so many agents with that. And if you haven't logged in a while, which happens, sometimes you're not working with active clients. It's been a while since you haven't logged in. Just make sure that all your emails are up to date with those three systems. I would start with the UAR, then the MLS, and then go into SkySlope. And if you're still having problems logging in, Chris will get you in, okay? Just be patient with him. So anything else you would add to that, Chris?
The one other thing is on SkySlope Forms, you just have to make sure that the URE and URAR libraries are added.
Okay.
Because it'll ask for your NRDS number when you're adding the UAR library. That's a key too.
Yes, and I wish we could demo this, but I already fixed it, so I can't demo it. But I had to, and this part was a little annoying. I had to call the board of realtors. I had to get my NERDS number and then go in, add that so I could pull up the templates. And you're mainly talking about the UAR templates, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Yep.
In the libraries on SkySlope Forms.
Okay, perfect. And if you try to find forms that are UAR approved forms and you can't find them, it's going to be that reason. You won't be able to access any of the UAR forms without having your NERDS number, okay, NRDS, and that's just your National Association of Realtors number that you can get by reaching out to whatever board you're affiliated with, okay? Any questions on that? Any questions on SkySlope issues? Oh, okay, cool. Well, then let's jump into probably why the majority of you are here, which is updated information on the NAR lawsuit, okay? And I'm one of those that holds a very optimistic view of the future. I feel like how things came out in the wash are better than they could have been. Where we are at right now is we are still waiting for the DOJ, the Department of Justice, to sign off on this. Why they are delaying, None of us know, okay? But every so-called expert, including the NAR attorneys, are all saying, when a suit has reached settlement like this, it's like 99.9% positive that the DOJ will sign off. For some reason, they just haven't yet. So where does that put us? Where that puts us is we have newly created forms from the UAR, the Utah Association of Realtors, but they're not yet released. Okay, so we've had a lot of you reach out and say, where are the forms? Where are the forms? Aren't we supposed to have these new forms? They said we'd have new forms in July. We don't have them yet. We don't have them. We have drafts of the new forms, which we'll be pulling up some of those today, but they're not fully approved yet because we have to wait on a national level for everything to be approved. Okay. So let's jump into that. Let's first talk about the impact on Realtypath. Okay. Probably the best news that came out is that we are not a part of the settlement. Okay. There's a lot of rumors going out that we are. We were a part of the local settlement. So I'm going to give a little bit of history on that. Okay. So the class action lawsuit started back in, I believe, 2020 in the state of Missouri. Okay. And I'll try to make a really long story as short as I can. Okay. The basis of the suit was that these home sellers were suing because they did not agree to pay a buyer's agent's commission. Okay, so usually when you get an exclusive right to sell agreement, you're negotiating a commission, and a portion of that commission is paid out as an affiliated compensation to a buyer's brokerage. Okay, in the state of Missouri, they didn't have any of that. They basically, the listing agent would write up a contract asking for a commission, typically a 6% commission, and then they would split that 50-50 with the buyer's agent. But nowhere in that exclusive right to sell agreement did it identify that a portion of the commission would be paid out to a buyer's agent, okay? And those home sellers won. The court ruled in their favor and said, okay, we're going to award this class action lawsuit, and it was in the hundreds of millions. And what that then did is all of your, and I know this is a little bit of a derogatory phrase, but all the ambulance chasing attorneys out there jumped on board and said, well, great. If Missouri did it, we're going to do it everywhere else, okay, Utah included. Now, because we were one of the largest brokerages in the state of Utah, we were named in that local suit, in the Utah suit, okay? What ended up happening about 2 months after that suit came out is NAR negotiated to make it a consolidated suit and take it away from the states and make it a national issue. So that local suit, as well as all the local suits, you know, all the state related suits disappeared. They went away, okay? So if you hear, we've had some competitors, I think this is dirty, but we've had some competitors say, well, Realtypath is a part of that statewide NAR suit. That is not true. They're using that as a tactic to try to recruit agents away. Because of the consolidation, we're no longer a part of that, okay? After the suit was consolidated, they came to a settlement, okay? And you probably heard about the settlement. And I feel like they came up with some arbitrary numbers. Those arbitrary numbers worked in our favor, but they basically looked at the year 2022 before the market really dipped and started to change because of interest rates. And they said for any real estate company that had sales volume of $2 billion or less would not have to be a part of the class action lawsuit. So our overall sales volume was significantly less than 2 billion in the year 2022, okay? So we're not a part of that. We don't have to pay out. There are some Utah companies that do, unfortunately, and we've spoken to them and they're negotiating and trying to figure out how to make that happen, okay? But as a company, fortunately, we're not a part of that, which is awesome, okay? Any questions about that portion before I move on to the next part? Oh, okay, good, awesome. So how does this impact us? Now, what I find funny and also unfortunate is Utah didn't do what Missouri did. Our agency agreements showed how much was going to a buyer's agent. So even if it had remained on the state level, we probably could have had a pretty good argument on a case-to-case basis. When you think of class action lawsuits, you usually think of like pharmaceutical companies who have done harm to consumers, okay? I find it unfortunate and kind of silly that real estate commissions ever found their way to a class action lawsuit. I mean, if it starts with real estate, who's to say that tomorrow it won't be accountants or attorneys? In fact, that'd be kind of refreshing to see attorneys go after attorneys for class action lawsuit, you know? But I'm like, we charge fees. I mean, even in the state of Missouri, you agreed to 6% and you paid it, right? The fact that it was shared with someone else, I don't know. My own personal opinion is it kind of shows how gray the law can be and how unfortunate the law can be. So, okay, the impact with the changes that we're seeing with the forms and how the business will be moving forward. So the very common question, probably the most common question I'm getting is, will this put the buyer's agent out of business? Okay, have you guys had that same question before? No, I don't think it will. And that is because we as an industry are, one, required to be licensed. Every state requires a license to sell real estate. And in order to sell real estate, we have a database, which we as an industry control. If we did not have a database that we didn't control, then it could be more problematic. But because we control that from a legal governmental standpoint, I think we will continue to see things kind of roll on as usual. We'll probably see some downward pressure, especially on pricing, okay? I think we'll see some agents who may not take the higher road and will say, well, I'll sell your home for $1,000. List with me. That's your only cost, $1,000. If the buyer's agent wants a commission, well, we'll let them negotiate when they come make an offer. We'll probably start to see a lot more of that, okay? However, I think good listing agents are going to sit down with their clients and they're going to say, you really want to sell this home, you need to offer a buyer's brokerage compensation, okay? That's where I feel like that's my optimistic viewpoint. I feel like that's going to be business as usual, okay? Now, why I feel that way, let me give a little bit of background. This is interesting. So we have a contact here in Utah, he lives in Utah, who works for Zillow. Now, for some of you, Zillow may be a naughty word, okay? For others of you, Zillow may be awesome. You may love Zillow, okay? Whatever your opinion is of Zillow, I was having a chat with him over a year ago and I said, there's one reason why realtors don't like Zillow, and it's because of your for sale by owner section. And he goes, Dave, you know, we hear that all the time. He's like, you know what's a really interesting statistic is that, do you want to know the percentage of for sale by owners that we have on Zillow? And I said, yes, I'd love to know. He said, it's 6%. He says, you want to know what it is since the beginning of time? I said, yeah. He said it was 6%. It's always been 6%. He's like, so that means that 94% of all clients who even purchased through Zillow or found their home through Zillow are represented by an agent, okay? And so some more backstory on Zillow, which is interesting, okay? And this isn't a plug for Zillow, by the way. It's just an interesting backstory. The co-founder of Zillow was the co-founder of Expedia.com. And he is on record saying that when he started Zillow, he had the same mission that he did when he started Expedia.com, and that was to put the real estate agent out of business. He said, when we started Expedia.com, we wanted to put the travel agent out of business. We didn't see any reason to have a middleman between the consumer and the airlines. He's like, we had that same vision when we looked at homes. We said, we didn't want a middleman between the home sellers and the buyers. And he said, when we got into business, what we found out is that philosophy and vision was smashed. It was destroyed because we realized that everybody who buys or sells a home wants an advocate. They want somebody in their corner advocating for them, okay? So he said we switched our business model completely. We went from trying to transform the industry and remove the real estate agent to working with the real estate agent, So I'm sure you guys have gotten their ads trying to get you to sign up for their premium programs and stuff like that. But I love hearing that because that's where my optimistic approach comes from. I feel like as an industry, buyers and sellers are going to want to use a professional who can help them through the home buying or selling process, okay? Even with this NAR change. I do think there will be some more companies that pop up who try to say, hey, let me sell your home for a discounted price. But at the end of the day, on the buying end, there will probably be a buyer's agent and a commission will need to be negotiated to pay that buyer's agent, okay? So let's talk about those changes. Now, before I talk about those changes, any questions up until this point? No? Okay, cool.
How many people use a travel agent though? I just go to Expedia and just book my own property, you know?
I don't think a lot of people use travel agents anymore. They succeeded there, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's fine.
I like using a travel agent.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not, it just didn't feel like it was like, oh, sorry. It didn't feel like it was 100% necessary, but it was nice.
well, you may pay a premium for it, right? I would think in today's day, you would use a travel agent if you were trying to be a part of some special excursion that you couldn't otherwise set up yourself, right? But I think kind of like the way that you used to have to set up travel, even with just airlines, just your run of the mill, I want to buy airline tickets. So much of that in the past was done through. But now you just jump on Google Flights or any of those travel sites. But if you want a specialized, customized excursion, yeah. Yep. So.
Especially working with the
Hold on.
airline. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're good.
I retired with the airline and in industry. And I will never do through a travel agent or Expedia, any of those. I would rather talk to the airline that I want to book directly because they own that reservation.
Yeah.
If you have done it through any other third person or a third carrier, then they don't own that
Yeah.
reservation. They cannot do any changes or any adjustments to your record. So you will have to get in contact with that.
Yes, that's
And
great.
try to get them on the weekend. It's impossible. So, or in the evening
Yeah.
for that matter.
Yep.
So,
Well, and airline tickets are obviously much different than selling a home. I think it's because this is considered the largest financial decision that somebody will make. They want somebody in their corner and they're willing to pay for that. And we know that because we've all sold real estate and we know when we receive a good commission, we've worked hard for it. You're appreciative of the work you put in and your client is as well. So, okay. Now let's talk about impacts on the industry before we jump into some of these templated forms and kind of look at that. Linda, how are we doing on time?
20 minutes.
20 minutes. Okay, good. Yeah, you're good. You're good. This is for the people online. So, yep.
So when we do these commissions, buyer's commission, so we're not going to try to get our buyers to pay us. We're still trying to get the sellers to pay a commission to the buyer's agent, correct? Or how is that going to work?
Yeah, so that's actually right where I'm going. So great question. Yep. So logically, we're going to get paid through the transaction, right? And where does that money come? It typically comes from the buyer. Even though in our industry, and this is why I think the class action lawsuit came about and why home sellers and some crafty attorneys joined together to make the class action lawsuit work, is we've kind of designed it as an industry to say the seller's paying for it, okay? Well, it doesn't matter how you say who's paying for it. What matters is where's the money coming from? And we know the money comes from the buyer, which typically comes from a mortgage, and that's paid through the transaction. Here's what we'll probably see more of. We may see some sellers who absolutely refuse to pay a buyer's agent's commission. And in those cases, the buyer would have to come out of pocket for that commission. And we're hearing in the loan industry that commissions can now be financed like a closing cost. Okay, so you'd be able to roll it into your mortgage loan. There's a lot of discussions about that.
You're saying they can be?
Can be.
Can be now.
Yep, can be.
Is that, so have they always been able to
No.
be? Okay,
No.
so now that they're making adjustments.
Yes, they're making adjustments for this very reason. My thought is I think a reasonable seller is going to say, and I'm going to use arbitrary figures. A reasonable seller says, hey, I've agreed to pay my listing agent, let's say $5,000 on a $500,000 home, but I don't want to pay a buyer's agent's commission. However, if you want a commission, we'll up the price to $515. You want a 3% commission, we'll up it to $515. I think we're going to see a lot of that. I think we're going to see some sellers who caught wind of this suit and are like, well, great, I don't have to pay a buyer's agent's commission. But a good listing agent is going to say, you need to understand the majority of buyers are represented. So if you want to sell your home, you're going to need to pay a commission. But I think some of those sellers who are a little bit less reasonable will just increase the price to pay the commission. Yeah, yeah, it probably will. But I also feel like reasonable sellers will understand that this is how the industry has worked. And maybe there'll be a slight price increase. Who knows? I think we're going to see all sorts of scenarios popping up. My own personal view is I think a good listing agent will convince their seller to pay a commission, to include it, to have that mindset that they should pay a buyer's agent's commission. So I don't think that will change. But I do think we'll see more companies that are coming in as discount brokers saying, I'll sell your home for $1,000, I'll sell your home for $1,500, and we'll let the buyer's agent, negotiate their commission when they come in. So we'll probably see more of that pop up. Yeah. And I think that's the direction that it will go. Now, let's talk about the tentative launch date for this. It was initially in July. It was supposed to be July 1st, if I recall. It is now August 17th, pending the DOJ's approval. Okay, so we're still waiting for that. And then once that is approved, then we will see these newly approved UAR documents. You're not going to see huge changes. Like if you read the changes that have already been done to the documents, they're not substantial. There's a section now that talks about class action lawsuits, and the person who signs a new buyer broker agreement or an exclusive right to sell agreement cannot participate in a class action lawsuit. So we're protecting ourselves for the future. Okay.
So we've got a couple questions from people.
Chris, can they hear you as you're?
Yeah, a little bit, but it'd be better if I.
Okay.
So there's a couple here. So the first one is, what stops a buyer from going to the seller's agent to get around paying a commission?
Okay, that's actually a very common question. So great question. What stops a buyer from going directly to a listing agent and skipping out on a buyer's agent altogether? So I think a lot of reasons. I think, first off, can they? Yes, they can. But let's look at how they get there in the first place, okay? They're going to get there typically through sites like Zillow, which I mentioned, or they're going to get there through sites like Realtor.com, where premium agents get to pay for premium placement and stuff like that. That is for buyers who are not already represented. I think what I love, let me rephrase that, what I love about our industry, and Lawrence, you said it best, we are a relationship-driven industry. Because this is such a huge financial decision, both on the buying end and the selling end, they're going to be asking friends and family members for recommendations. I need to buy a home. Oh, great. Do you have an agent? I know a good agent. Let me give you their contact information. Okay. And I think a good buyer's agent will be able to explain their value, their worth, and also explain that, if you're going directly to that listing agent, you're not going to get the representation that you need. Okay. Now, can they? Yes, they can. And this is where I think we'll see some downward pressure on our commissions. We already have seen that. I meant to mention this at the beginning of today. And that was when we had to go through the exercise to make sure that we were not a part of that NAR settlement payout. When we looked at our commissions over the last several years, the average was around 2.25% on any given transaction side. That already shows me that you as agents are willing to take less, okay? I think we've all been in that position where we hope for 3, and we know the transaction gets messy, buyer and seller are at each other's throats, and we'll throw in a couple $1,000s here and there, okay? Whether we're discounting or whether we're willing to discount, depending on the situation, I think that already shows downward pressure. So I could see buyer's agents even offering discount services or rebates, you know? Do I think that will be the norm? My own personal opinion is no. I think it's worth it as an industry to fight for our livelihood, you know, especially for how long a transaction can take, you know. I don't work with a lot of clients. I've got one right now. I'm on month 7 of working with them. Am I worth every penny I'm making? Yes, you have all been there, you know, and they know it too. When they look at how much I've done, I know, you know, when they see the payout, they're going to be like, oh, yeah, you're worth that. Okay. But will there be downward pressure? Yes. Will buyers go directly to sellers? Sure. I think you could see that. But I think that that some buyers will get into that situation and be like, oh gosh, what did I get myself into? Okay. Now that leads me, Chris, do you have more questions?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So to clarify, did you say that commissions can be financed?
Perhaps. It's not concrete, but what I'm hearing from the mortgage side of the real estate industry is that there's going to be legislation put into place to allow for financing of real estate commissions.
Okay. And then how will it affect appraisals?
I don't know. Yeah, I wish I knew. I hope it doesn't, especially where it sounds like it'll be more like a concession and being tacked on to the loan. I think that may be completely independent of appraisals. I think what may end up happening is an appraisal happens, and if a seller is absolutely no way, no how willing to pay a buyer's agent's commission, then that commission can be financed and tacked on to the loan. So just like additional closing costs if those are needed. So, yeah. But it's moving in that direction, Chris. I can tell you that the higher ups are talking about legislation that would allow for that, okay? But don't go quoting that your principal broker said that they will be, just say, I've heard. So, yes. Wait, hold on. Yeah, sorry.
So are you saying as listing agents, are we going to now list with it at a lower rate? Because when we do our comps, it's always covering the commission that we shared with the other side. So now, are they going to expect it to be lower just to raise it higher to finance? Or why can't they just be smart enough to come out with a form that goes between brokerages that states, hey, it's still the same game. We're just going to promise you here that we're splitting the commission, because you know that there's going to be some of the realtors that give us a bad name that are going to still list at a 5%, give you nothing, and then make you up the price.
Okay, so you had like 3 different questions there. Let me answer the first one. The first one, I'm going to say, I don't know. It's speculation as to what will happen. You know, especially on like limited agency, there's a lot of talk as to whether or not the state of Utah will move in the direction of prohibiting limited agency, which I think would actually be good too. Even if a buyer does go directly to the seller and limited agency ends up being prohibited, and I know that there's a lot of talks in the Department of Real Estate that limited agency may be done away with. Once again, don't quote me as saying that that will happen. It's speculation, okay? But if that does happen, then listing agents will be required to have that buyer sign an unrepresented buyer form. And there will probably be extra disclosures that even admit that they don't have representation, all the things that the standard form says, but things that that should give the buyer caution about moving forward without representation. So, but hold on, before you ask your question, let me answer the other 2. Going back to the business as usual part that you're asking about, we are going to cover what one of the regulations or one of the stipulations, I guess, from this lawsuit that we are required to do to show a buyer's broker's compensation. Chris is going to demo that here in a moment. So we'll talk about that. And I think there will continue to be cooperation. I really do. So go ahead. Are you good? Yeah. Are you sure? Okay. Okay. Any other questions online?
There are, yeah, if you want to cover those.
Yep. And I think we can wrap up pretty quickly. And if people feel like that it requires another follow-up, we'll get together again. So don't worry. And as much as Linda may not like it, I may go 5 or 10 minutes over. So.
All right. So can you speak to the buyer rep requirement and how that will now be a requirement to open doors?
Yes.
I personally get tired of buyer's agent showing my listing on what is obviously a non-serious Zillow lead buyer that they got from the internet and have not even pre-approved. How will this new requirement of the buyer representation requirement be enforced?
Yes. Okay. I'll answer the first part. I commiserate with your second part, but I won't talk to that. Okay. The first part is there's a lot of discussions about having to get representation before showing. We do have forms already produced from the St. George, the Washington County Board of Realtors, and our broker down there, Rand McCullough, has sent those forms to us, and they have come up with a document that is simply just a showing document, which is interesting because I didn't realize that that could be a solution. It sounds like all the other boards may follow suit. So the initial talks where you had to get full-blown representation, okay? But now there's a form that simply will allow for just showings, okay? And there's more to come on that. I think that will simplify things because you're going to get a lot of buyers who will be hesitant to go see a home if they have to sign a buyer broker up front. And I know a lot of you have expressed to me, I like to go build a relationship first. I want to go meet with them, let them meet with me, build that rapport, and then we will sign a buyer broker agreement. So that's pending, but it sounds like a showing form is what will allow a buyer's agent to go show properties, okay? And not to shoot down your second part there, but yes, my own personal belief is even before you get someone pre-qualified, you're trying to build rapport with them. Hopefully, once you build rapport, you can take them to a great LO like Ann and get them, pre-approved and all that jazz. So, yeah. Anyway.
So
Linda, you want to?
So is it still the idea that every home we show, we would need to have them sign for each home or?
No.
Per
Yeah,
county?
yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, you want to mention that? Go ahead. They'll
Yeah,
hear
you can still have your buyer broker agreement per county. You can have it for an extended amount of time. You can still have that like we do now.
And you could put the whole state
You
too,
could
if you
put the
wanted
whole
to. A lot of
state,
people will
yeah.
put the full
Yep.
state of Utah.
So
That
that's
showing
gonna be the same.
form, my understanding with the showing form is it's now per client. It authorizes you as the buyer's agent to allow you to show a property without having full representation. And I think the way that it will probably end up being is it'll be like, I'm required by the state of Utah to use this form to show you a property. If you like me and you want to work with me, I am required by the state of Utah before you make an offer to sign a buyer broker agreement. Yep. So that part is still in the works. Initially, when they launched this, it kind of spooked us all because we're like, oh crap, now we have to get a buyer broker agreement before all showings, and then it could end up being dog eat dog. This showing form, I think, will help simplify that. The ideal would still to get a buyer broker agreement beforehand, but the showing form will at least allow you to make that introduction, meet somebody, take them from home to home, and then sell your services. As an agent, here's my value, here's my services, and then you can talk to them however you want to about commission. You can say the majority of homes will pay commission. In those situations where a commission isn't paid, we'll negotiate it. That would be my take. I would say we'll negotiate it in the offer, and then that dreaded question, well, what happens if they don't allow it? You get to make that call. Do you step away from that client? Do you work out a discounted commission? I don't know. That is the one part that will become a little more difficult, is if we have sellers who are stick in the mud saying, no way, no how, I'm not paying you. I don't think we're going to see a lot of those. I really don't. So, Chris, any other pressing questions from our agents online?
There's a couple questions.
Okay.
A minute. Can we speak to what if the commission is less than the buyer broker? How do we handle that?
Great. Yes, that is actually on my list today. So the difference, if the commission offered on the listing, and this is already in effect, right? I mean, if you have, let's say you have 3% on your buyer broker agreement, but the listing is only offering 2%, you do have that real estate payment addendum. Okay, which by the way, I hate that title because my brain doesn't work that way. I think commission, not the word payment. How often do we say payment in the industry? So if you're going onto the MLS and you're going to the form section and you're trying to find that addendum, don't look up the word commission. I do that mistake all the time. Look up the word payment and you'll find the real estate payment addendum. And that addendum will stay in place. That is the addendum you will use to negotiate the difference, okay? And that's the addendum we already use to negotiate a difference. Now, let's go ahead and answer the obvious, logical next question, which is what if the seller refuses? Then all those other things apply. Either you're going to have to get the buyer to pay for it at closing, or potentially roll it into the loan, or discount. If for some reason you can't come to an agreement, then you may have to ask yourself, is 2% enough? I would dare say that probably in most situations, it probably is. But if you're really stuck on getting whatever you put in that buyer broker agreement, then you would have to include that real estate payment addendum, okay? Any others on there?
Yeah, there's a couple more.
And Linda, I think I can get done in 6 minutes. I think it's possible, so.
So quick on this one.
yeah, we'll
What
talk
about
about that.
VA loans and government loans for first-time buyers?
What's the question? I'm sorry.
It just says, what about VA loans and government loans for first-time buyers? Maybe that,
Paying commissions? Like, will commissions be paid out on those, or?
maybe they'll give us.
Yeah,
a
I
little
don't
more
think it'll
context here in a
change.
second.
Yeah, it's just a different type of loan. Yeah, I think agents would still get paid their commissions. Maybe your question is, would we be able to include commissions in those loans? Yes, yes. Okay, I understand the question. The answer, my understanding is the legislation that's happening both on the local level, the state level, and the federal level would allow a commission to be financed even in a VA, a USDA rural housing loan, and a FHA. So once again, don't quote me on that. I'm not the one doing the legislation.
So there's a lot of like, don't quote me on that. This legislation might be happening, but like, it's like August when all this stuff is going to start. So like all this stuff is not all going to be worked out when we're supposed to start doing these new things. None of the loans with rolling and commissions, none of that stuff is going to be figured out when we have to start doing this new thing, correct?
I hope it is.
It
I
doesn't
hope
seem
it's
like
all
it's
in
going, it seems
place.
like it's going to be like in like stages.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so her question, to piggyback on your question, is will it potentially be pushed out from August? And the answer is probably yes. If the DOJ hasn't signed off, and I would love to see all this stuff put into place, because otherwise it's going to be a crap show. It's going to be one of those where we learn as we go. Yeah. But my hope is, now if we are kind of in a position where we're pigeonholed and we learn as we go, then that may be tough. We may run into some situations where we lose out on commissions. I hope not. I hope not. My hope is that all of those, things are in place before we hit launch.
Is Realtypath like willing to be flexible on the commissions that they take from transactions? If there's this like stage where there's like commissions might be lost, like if there's an $895 transaction fee and there's a transaction that's going to be $1,200 commission, there's like no reason to do it. I mean, is there going to be flexibility from brokerages to their agents as well?
That's a good question. That's a good question. Probably that particular question is one to discuss offline, because we'll have people who sell mobile homes where they're like, I'm only getting $1,500 and I have to pay $895. And the quick answer is it goes towards your cap. If you're under the cap, you're only paying the $395, which is great, but it is harder on those lower commissions. So absolutely. Good question.
Dave, my friend.
Yeah.
The reason I'm here today is because I have a listing coming this weekend.
Okay.
In Cottonwood Heights. And so I do all the documents just as I've been doing for the past. I don't need to make any changes.
Yes.
Commissions, everything.
Yep.
Nothing changed. Okay.
Now let's speak to the question that will come up, because you said it the way a realtor will say it. how will your consumers? Because you're going to have consumers like, oh, I'm reading all this stuff online, an NAR lawsuit. How does this affect me? And I think you can say it doesn't affect you. If you want to sell your home, you're still going to have representation. I'm your representation. I'm going to help you. If you want to sell it faster, I highly recommend you offer buyer's agent's commission. That's where I think it'll be business as usual. But that is the question that we're hearing time and time again from consumers is, how does this affect me? And you can say the good news is it really shouldn't affect you. It doesn't affect you. It was a class action lawsuit against our industry. It shouldn't affect you as a consumer. As a home seller, you still have the right to pay commission. You still have the right to representation. And I highly recommend you pay a buyer's agent's commission. So
I think over time, the stats are gonna bear out though. We're gonna be able to see, you know, the people that did pay commissions, how quickly the houses sold
Yeah.
versus the ones. So we're gonna be able to use those statistics in our listing presentation. I
Yeah.
think it will all bear out, so.
We're not gonna be able to see it.
we won't be able to see compensation, but I do agree that, but actually where she is right is the MLS will still show whether or not there was an affiliated concessions or an affiliated broker. So you're right. You'd be able to see, was there a listing agent and was there a buyer's agent? Will we be able to see what the commission was? No, we won't. But to your point, if the majority of sold homes you pull up show a buyer's agent, that's pretty good indication that, you know, you're going to sell faster. What I imagine will happen that could be the wild, wild west is if for some reason home sellers are really determined not to pay a buyer's agent's commission, and buyers are now unrepresented, I think we're going to see a lot of lawsuits go up. Right? I think we're going to see a lot of buyers who say, well, I didn't know about this. Well, you didn't disclose that to me. And now listing agents are getting sued because there was no buyer and they were trying to cut out the buyer's agent. That's another reason as a listing agent, I strongly encourage you as a listing agent, push your sellers for a buyer's agent's commission. You don't want to be in that situation where some buyer's like, well, I relied on the information you gave me and it was inaccurate. And you're like, crap, I should have had a buyer's agent on the other end. So yes. Norma.
Yes, I have 2 new constructions supposed to be done about, you know, February. So I wonder how is that going to work with the builders if they're going to.
So my understanding is whatever contracts were put into place and
should
they
honor
stay
it.
enforced.
Yeah, they should honor
Yep, that should
Okay.
not change anything.
But do you see it change?
Nothing out of what we've already discussed today.
Okay.
I think good builders are going to be builders who say, I see a value in a buyer's agent. I'm going to pay them a commission. And that's the case right now. I think the good builders are the ones who are not trying to cut out a buyer's agent. I think they realize a buyer's agent is going to bring them business. So good. Okay. We are out of time and it's probably worth doing what I'd prefer to do. Let me tell you my preference. My preference would be, I don't want to train on a form. I was even thinking about this morning. I don't want to train on a draft. I'd rather train on what's actually going to be launched. If you guys want to see the drafts, you're welcome to reach out to the various boards and say, hey, can I see your drafts? They're not huge changes. Okay. So if you want to get a flare of what they say, they mostly, you know, mention what I mentioned before, that there can no longer be a class action lawsuit. And it does very well specify the difference between representation and compensation going to a buyer's brokerage commission. Okay.